Look, you knew this was going to happen eventually, so let's just rip off the band-aid. Super Mario Sunshine is an enigma, in so many ways, in so many circles, in so many think pieces. Accepted universally as both the best and worst Mario game. Take a dive into my own personal history for a bit. I was a huge fan of Sunshine when I was a kid, but I was also a fan of Sonic 06 when I was a kid, so nostalgia isn't a super accurate metric to measure my current enjoyment. My tastes have shifted so radically over the years that I've had to reevaluate my stance on collectathons. After scripting my Mario 64 video, I began to wonder whether I truly did the game justice. I've loved both Sunshine and 64 for as long as I can remember. Reading back that script, listening back to that video is shocking. I didn't want to admit that my opinion of 64 may have lowered with time. I had a script written up for Sunshine almost as soon as production started on 64. I had a pretty big plan to cover every 3D Mario game in one big shot, similar to my Zelda series retrospective. Obviously, that didn't pan out. I scrapped my old script, I scrapped all my old footage to help me move on. I wanted some space from Sunshine so I could work on myself first. God, this sounds like a bad breakup. My point is that the impetus for my hiatus was in how initially negative my impressions were. Almost to the point of eclipsing any relatively minor problems I had with 64. It didn't feel right, so I sat on it for a while and this is the result. I think I've come to grips with my current perspective on 3D Mario in the same way I found a solid perspective on 3D Zelda. It just took some time for me to get there. Strap in for a Super Mario Sunshine retrospective.
Super Mario Sunshine! Woohoo!
Creating a sequel to one of the most critically acclaimed and culturally relevant video games of all time is a scary prospect. I can't imagine the thought process behind what the dev team would improve, change, innovate. Where do you even begin? Do you know how much pressure there must have been to create a follow-up to Super Mario 64 of all games? Mario is their biggest IP, their Mickey Mouse, and I imagine every time they drop a game for them, it's observed with a hypercritical eye. Nintendo's always had a knack for quality control, but for Mario and Zelda, the top dogs, that eye gets even sharper. Ocarina of Time, of a similar cultural status, was followed by what many consider to be a completely unconventional sequel, and many would argue Sunshine is the same. You can't tell me you watched these Save the Environment PSA commercial hybrids and didn't at least raise an eyebrow?
Everyone loves a sunshiny day. We're gonna keep it that way. Let's clean is better than dirty, and dirty's meaner than clean.
Let's all lend a helping hand. Mario can't do it alone. He'll spray his water to fly around and clean the sludge that's on the ground.
Let's clean is better than dirty, and dirty's meaner than clean.
Super Mario Sunshine, only for Nintendo GameCube. Rated E for everyone.
I suppose if you can't one-up your resident masterpiece, a new approach may yield interesting results. The GameCube era is almost famous for it. Wind Waker tried for a radically different art style, Metroid Prime marched forward in a bold new gameplay direction, Resident Evil 4 revolutionized a more immersive camera perspective. Is it any surprise that Sunshine comes along and the premise is that Mario goes on a vacation, gets arrested, and is tasked with cleaning an entire island's worth of toxic goop using a talking water jetpack? In an interview for the Japan-exclusive Nintendo Online magazine, director Yoshiaki Koizumi explained that the idea to use a water pump was the starting point, hoping to add this new mechanic onto what worked in Mario 64. The interesting part, for me anyway, is that they considered having a man next to Mario to pump the water out of a hose. They decided against it because it would be incongruous with Mario's general aesthetic. Boy, how times have changed. The decision to create a successor to Mario 64 with the only notable difference being that Mario has a water jetpack is undoubtedly insane, though I'm convinced you have to be at least a little crazy to develop video games. I'm kidding, by the way. The most interesting part about this interview is Koizumi's quote, "What worked in Mario 64?" It seems like a simple question, but think about this. Don't think about what you think worked. Don't think about what other people think worked. Just place yourselves in the shoes of Koizumi and his co-workers. What did they think about Mario 64? What did they think themselves? What did they perceive from critical and casual perception? What did they think? Safe to say they're a fan of collectathons as a game type. Mario collects shine sprites as stand-ins for stars across colorful hub-like levels. Given how each stage was designed, I'm not convinced any of them were fans of stages like Rainbow Ride or Tick-Tock Clock, as the only stage with what can be considered a bottomless pit is Pianta Village, and even then, it doesn't become a threat until you venture under said stage. The rest rely on the player's ability to free roam and complete objectives. Levels evolve across Shine sprites in a much more visible way than they did in 64, with almost every mission changing something substantial about the portion of Isle Delfino you're visiting. Most obviously, Isle Delfino has a cohesive theme, a tropical paradise. Mario 64 was disconnected. There were tons of motifs, scattered aesthetics, but I think Koizumi keyed in on something specific that captured the hearts of players. They would spend a lot of time not just in the castle, but exploring each stage and completing challenges. They'd craft a very intimate relationship with each stage, to the point where that relationship could be described as a kind of immersion. Humor me for a sec. Why do people love Super Mario 64? Besides throwing out the nostalgia claim, because I think there's a lot more to it. Jolly Roger Bay has the iconic music, the dark blue color palette, the rock spires, the pirate ship. You're swimming around in a cove, swimming with eels and finding treasure. It isn't immersive because it's realistic or something. It's immersive because all of its seemingly disparate elements come together to craft a pocket of escapism, which is partly why I lamented the boot-out system so harshly. And not only were there repetitive implications, getting booted out of that painting meant that my immersion was constantly being broken. It was as if Nintendo were dangling it in front of my face, never truly allowing me to fully immerse myself. I wanted to stay there. I wanted to explore as much as I could until I moved on to the next painting. Nevertheless, I can't say 64 didn't still overwhelmingly succeed at creating iconic courses. In a sense, even though it didn't have a coherent theme, jumping into a new painting had its own allure. Dreamlike in essence, literally jumping into a whole new world where concepts like shape and size cease to matter. You can jump through seemingly solid stone walls only to find yourself somewhere fresh and exciting. Exploration is the key to its success. Rarely is there involved platforming in any of these stages, and the stages that do end up worse for it. Sunshine actively attempts to distance itself from tradition and improve upon the more unique ideas to 64 specifically, even if Koizumi didn't necessarily think about it in terms of immersion at the time. They made conscious attempts to remind the player that you're exploring a real location, a real island. Each stage is visible somewhere in the distance no matter where you might be. As a kid, it may sound dumb, but this was extra special to me. This kind of thing is the reason why people describe Dark Souls as so immersive, right? To see other areas you've explored in the distance, to marvel at areas you have yet to explore, to wonder. The idea that I could see where I just was, that I could see where I was about to go, it alleviated part of the problem that came with the boot-out system in the first place. Even if I am constantly getting thrown out of Pina Park, at least I can still see that it exists off in the distance. It doesn't necessarily take away from the idea that I'm getting immersed in the sights and sounds of Isle Delfino. You are exploring a tropical paradise, and while it may mean that levels look very similar to each other and that there are multiple renditions of the beach level, it also means that, much like Metroid Prime 2, Delfino Plaza is far more memorable and immersive as a location than Peach's Castle. Sure, the hub of Peach's Castle is extremely memorable, and the individual courses are memorable in their own ways, but all of it is, again, disconnected. Sunshine has an interconnected feel with a consistent change over time. Light gradually returns to Isle Delfino with every Shine sprite collected. You eventually eliminate all of the toxic goop in each level, and are then greeted by a celebration of some kind to commemorate your success. Levels evolve and manage to take advantage of their somewhat limiting structure in a way 64 only dreams it could. Compare the small tower they add to Whomp's Fortress to the evolution of a level like Noki Bay. The water is poisoned, and each of the levels are dedicated to figuring out why that might be. It takes you to several potential sources of the problem, small-time bloopers, a corked waterfall, until you reach the real source down below and it turns out to be the dirty teeth of an eel. After dealing with Shadow Mario and cleansing the bay of any and all toxicity, you float down below to celebrate with the residents, who can finally dwell underwater without harm. Maybe you felt I was stretching about this whole immersion thing, but I challenge you to look at something like this and come to the conclusion that it isn't a fully realized explorable island. Use whatever word you like, I'm gonna use immersion. Whenever it's summertime, instead of going outside like a healthy person, I often like to sit back and explore Isle Delfino instead. Which probably makes me a bad person. Can you blame me though? There's something about the calming and relaxing atmosphere of Sunshine that no other game has ever come close to matching, and I think that's what Koji Kondo realized Koizumi was ultimately going for. The incredibly unique music with a combination of instruments and melodies that I've simply never heard before. I'm not a music guy, I've said this countless times, so I have a hard time trying to describe why certain songs grab me over other songs. I liked the soundtrack of Mario 64 and its classic Koji Kondo, but I loved the soundtrack for Sunshine. Every song fits the situation. Ricco Harbor is more involved and is what I think of when I look at any pier or dock. Gelato Beach screams beach music. Have you ever stopped to think about how influential music can be to your overall enjoyment of a game? As hard as it is for me to admit, sometimes I feel like my enjoyment of any game is substantially improved if it has a killer soundtrack. Music is almost a method of hard-coding memories and feelings into my brain about specific moments or sections. Exploring Bianco Hills for the first time, winding down that beginning corridor with the sprinklers, will always be associated with fond, nostalgic memories that trigger upon hearing the beginning few notes of the music. When I listen to this song, I remember what I was doing when the song was being played, and this extends to games that I don't even have nostalgic memories with. I listen to Death by Glamour and Undertale and remember the exhilarating Mettaton fight. I listen to Bone Trussel and of course Papyrus comes to mind. I listen to Megalovania and remember how I'm a horrible human being with no hope of redemption. In the same vein, I listen to Noki Bay and just sit there thinking, I've been to a place like that in real life, and this music personifies that moment. Is there anything more perfect than that? I'd love to wrap that in a little bow and call it a day, but it isn't quite that simple. Yes, it is far more immersive and well realized in its presentation and level design. This is only a single portion of a much larger painting, though. If we start at the baseline strength, what I believe to be the thesis for Sunshine's very inception, how many of its other elements follow that strength? For example, are the controls more fluid than they were in 64? Do they fit the levels they're placed in? Do they take anything away from the levels themselves? Well, let's start positive. Sunshine is the natural next step for 3D Mario control, and this is where I feel the series controls the best in 3D. Allow me to give my definition of best in this instance. I am not describing a technical best, I am describing an ambitious best. Super Mario 3D World holds the record for the technical best control in any Mario game, but that comes with a host of limitations I don't appreciate. You can only move in 8 directions, the triple jump is completely removed along with the dive, the only 2 moves that remain for keeping momentum are the side flip and long jump. I do concede that this control scheme, simple as it is, works perfectly for 3D World's simpler level design. Introducing more moves would likely feel redundant and take away from its subdued take on 3D Mario. I am simply highlighting that Sunshine is where Mario is the most experimental. He can triple jump, dive, side flip, spin jump, wall jump, hover nozzle, rocket nozzle, turbo nozzle. There are so many more options, and you can combine some moves with the FLUDD for added range. Spray some water on the ground, dive into the water, and Mario uses it to increase the velocity of his slide, allowing him to move at speeds that would make Sonic the Hedgehog blush. Spin jump and use your hover nozzle at the height of your jump to extend your jump length, or do the same with the rocket nozzle to extend your jump height. Mario slides down walls, allowing for easy wall jumps, the spacious level design allows for more flexible side jumps, and the various nozzles Mario can use add that extra safety net while you're still adjusting to the expanded moveset. I mean, sometimes trying to get the hover nozzle to turn is a nightmare unless you already had a prime lead-up jump in the direction you wanted to go. Otherwise, you're left faffing about in the air trying to turn, all the while biting your nails because that hover nozzle cycle is gonna run out in 2 seconds. These, however, are exceptions to the rule, and the best part about the controls, each of the levels, from Bianco Hills to Pianta Village, are custom fit for their ambitious nature. Imagine slightly larger variants of Bob-omb Battlefield. Pianta Village is pushed onto you near the end, which makes sense considering it's the only level with instant kill hazards. You tackle it after becoming familiar with the game's more understandable systems. Sunshine prefers to use verticality and slow surfaces such as water to promote inconvenience as a punishment rather than death. Mario 64 had this to varying degrees, but Sunshine took it a step further. Pinna Park has park attractions hovering over the rest of the park. Pianta Village has both the topside portion with the giant tree and various buildings, while the downside portion has catwalks hovering over a bottomless pit. Failing to platform means that you'll just need to find your way back up in the beginning, a very organic translation of the traditional retry system. Instead of dying and restarting a level from the beginning, Sunshine retains the sense of frustration you get when falling off a platform without completely shattering immersion. You'd think this would be a recipe for success, so why then do the secret courses exist? These are significant spikes in difficulty, no doubt to make up for the lack of challenge in the actual levels. There's no getting around the fact that FLUDD can act as a crutch to normal platforming. Flub a jump, and you can hover nozzle your way to safety in most instances. In the secret areas, you don't have that same luxury. All of a sudden, that crutch you've been so used to using is taken away, and you're forced to rely on your base platforming. I liken this feeling to putting on training weights, or for a more weedy example, when Goku trains under increased gravity while he travels to Namek. When FLUDD is taken away, it feels like Goku training under 10 times gravity, but when you get FLUDD back, all of a sudden you're much stronger at base platforming. You might even become a Super Saiyan, who knows? There's no doubt that these secret courses are usually well designed and make great use of Mario's expanded control scheme in a completely new context. Yet they're completely disconnected from the rest of the game. In Mario 64, often these secret courses or linear challenge-based sections were easier for me to brush off. It already went for a more disconnected theme, so entering some weird black dream space was far more consistent. In some instances, it even heightened the tension, like the mini-levels that led up to each Bowser boss encounter. Sunshine has one of these sections at the end of the game, which has its own inherent problems, but at least it serves to ramp up the tension while you book it to Bowser. The rest of these sections are isolated within the existing stages, often in some offshoot cave, tower, Boo statue, practically anything. You jump in there, get transported to this retro throwback pocket dimension, and suddenly this is a traditional platformer again for a few minutes. Not only is this game in particular relying heavily on its sense of thematic cohesion and immersion already, it further reveals that its systems are rigidly segmented. Upon completing one of these challenges, you're just spat out into Delfino Plaza, and if you decide to go back into the base stage, you're back to pushing around watermelons or searching for blue coins. These two game styles don't mix at all. You know, one of these things is not like the other. This became so much more apparent to me when I realized the strength that comes with Sunshine's focus on immersion. The levels create situations that allow for natural platforming. I was completing a mission in Ricco Harbor that had me running around on the narrow overhead beams, avoiding the gusts of wind, and jumping my way to the top. You enter the stage and immediately you know what it's all about. Cranes, freights, ships, the works. When I got to jumping around on the cranes so I could reach the beams, I slowly realized that this is a traditional Mario level, framed as if it was in a real location. Isle Delfino is already crafted as if it's a place that could reasonably exist in his universe. Trying to stay on the beams is a challenge, even with FLUDD, thanks to the gusts of wind appearing everywhere to throw you off. They're pretty hard to shoot out of the air, so your best bet is to jump over them or veer to the side. A little hard to do when you're already navigating a precarious narrow beam in the sky. Again, falling off simply means you redo a platforming challenge, but since there are so many different ways to get back up, you might not necessarily be redoing the same platforming challenge. In this sense, it feels like Mario really is on a botched vacation, collecting the shines scattered by Shadow Mario so he can then get back to said vacation. You're exploring an actual place, and the gameplay conforms to that idea. Sometimes it means you aren't platforming, as is the case in Serena Beach. You spend a majority of time inside the hotel, navigating this labyrinth of rooms connected by invisible paintings, haunted ventilation systems. It's the perfect tropical rendition of your typical Boo mansion, and the gameplay is fit for said purpose. It stands to reason a hotel wouldn't offer many opportunities for sick platforming as much as it is a maze of locked doors and secrets. It encourages you to explore like nothing I've ever seen. Running around, platforming, exploring, whatever you end up doing, every stage allows for this to be fun in its own unique way. The secret stages completely go against this idea. They're at odds with the style of the actual stages and have dull, repetitive presentations. Black backgrounds, basic shapes, random Mario memorabilia thrown in there to remind you, hey, this is where the video game is, am I right? Strictly challenge-based platforming won't mesh with the rest of the game unless it's organically woven into the environments themselves. Imagine if these little challenges were somehow incorporated into the actual stages in the same way the overhead beams are in Rico Harbor or the park attractions in Peanut Park. I'm assuming they couldn't fit everything in that space, and I completely understand. That's why I don't mind when some sections are bridged by a loading screen, as long as it still makes sense. There's an underground blooper racing section in Rico Harbor because it makes sense that there'd be a sewer underground. This way you can transition to a completely disconnected space via a loading screen, but still feel like you're in Isle Delfino. I'm also pretty lenient on mini levels like the Sandbird. It doesn't really make sense, but you enter it through the hatched egg, it has different music, and above the clouds look, and it feels almost as if you've entered the Sandbird's dream. It doesn't take me out of the world, since it's linked to a concept you were building through the previous shines. It isn't just shoved in a random cave with no significance, that's my point. Hence, my problem with everything else. The Poison River, disregarding the BS required to get in, is a random isolated challenge floating in the sky that you enter via a warp pipe on some island in Delfino Plaza. A floating pachinko machine, floating grass? I should reiterate that this isn't a break in realism, it's a break in immersion. It's important to understand the difference. Mario's a wacky plumber guy who jumps real high and exists in a universe where a spiky dinosaur steals his princess everywhere they go. I do not expect realism. I'm fine with Yoshi spitting juice and turning enemies into platforms. I'm fine with Mario having a talking water jetpack. It's a wacky universe with wacky ideas. However, I do have a problem with the game so nonchalantly crafting an unparalleled sense of immersion and then shattering it by introducing an assortment of wildly varying ideas. This is such a problem for me because without this sense of immersion, almost none of the game would appeal to me. Simply running around Isle Delfino would cease to be fun in its own right if the place didn't feel as comfortable to reside in. You'd just be left with half-baked, experimental missions in areas you care nothing about. Which brings me to Sunshine's greatest enemy, pacing. You might recall that one of my biggest criticisms with Mario 64 was its boot-out system. It essentially meant that upon collecting a star or dying, you'd be booted out of a stage and forced to re-enter. It sounds like a minor problem, but these boot-outs add up over time, and especially when tied to death, can be incredibly frustrating. With that said, I can't say I'd consider it a critical flaw. It's super annoying, I wish it wasn't there, but it doesn't necessarily clash with the game's already fairly disconnected theming. Here we have a game that's trying to be interconnected, existing alongside a system meant to keep you disconnected. Super Mario Sunshine is built just like Mario 64 and is fundamentally smaller than 64, but it takes about as long to complete, if not longer. How is that even possible? Well, Sunshine is milked for all that it's worth. There are only 7 worlds, not counting Corona Mountain or Delfino Airstrip. The kicker is that these worlds are not necessarily larger in size or packed with more content than anything in 64. Gelato Beach and Bob-omb Battlefield are about the same size with about as much content. I'd guess that each world in Sunshine is a slight bit bigger than the average world size of 64. Delfino Plaza even has about as much going for it as Peach's Castle. Conservatively, that'd put Sunshine at about the equivalent of what 9 worlds in 64 would get you content-wise, but 64 had 15 courses. Both games also have a star count of 120. Now, where, my friends, did Sunshine go wrong? Alright, so each stage has 11 shines, including the 100 coin shine in that total. Let's take Bianco Hills as our template. 8 of those shines are completed via a mission, 1 of them is the 100 coin shine, and the final 2 are secret shines. These 2 secret shines are obtained in the 2 secret areas, which you'll be required to revisit after completing each of them the first time. Let's break this down. Shine 1, Road to the Big Windmill. All you've got to do is reach Shadow Mario and take out your 3rd polluted piranha, the mere moment after you defeated the one to open the way to Bianco Hills, which was just after the one you defeated in the opening. Once you defeat the polluted piranha, you get a shine sprite, leave the level, and go back in. Shine 2, Down with Petey Piranha. This time you take the same path to where you defeated the polluted piranha, then continue off climbing the windmill and fight the Petey Piranha boss. Boot out of the level, back in. Shine 3, the Hillside Cave Secret. Go the same way you did, except veer right, enter the special stage, do the special stage, yada yada, leave, enter again. Shine 4, red coins of the Windmill Village. This time, go down the beginning path, then explore the village to your left for the 8 red coins. Boot out, enter again. Shine 5, PD Piranha strikes back. Go to the village, shoot PD Piranha, fight a slightly altered version of the same boss, grab Shine, leave, enter. Shine 6, the secret of the Dirty Lake. Go to the windmill again, go behind the windmill, do secret area, leave, enter again. Shine 7, Shadow Mario on the loose. Chase and douse Shadow Mario with enough water, leave, enter again. Shine 8, red coins of the lake. Go to the place where you fought the polluted piranha again, explore the lake surrounding the windmill, get 8 red coins, shine, leave, enter. Get a secret shine by running all the way to the hillside secret area and do the secret area again with Flood and a timer. Collect the 8 red coins, leave, enter. Get a secret shine in the secret area behind the windmill again. Collect the 8 red coins, leave, enter. Collect 100 coins. Get shine. Leave. That's not even counting the blue coins, by the way. This was the format of 64 as well, I acknowledge that, but Sunshine takes it a step further. Every single shine boots you out of the level. Even the 100 coin shine, which didn't boot you out in 64, does so in Sunshine. Why? When you race Piantissimo and lose, you die and boot out of the level. If you fail the Glooper 8 red coins in Rico Harbor, you die and boot out of the level. Hell, if you so much as run into a wall with a Glooper, you die and boot out of the level. At least the secret areas have the common decency to spawn you at the beginning of the secret area. You already need to revisit every single secret area for the timed 8 red coin missions within them. Scratch that, you don't need to do any of that actually. To open Corona Mountain and beat the game, you're required to do the 7th mission in all 7 worlds. Sounds fine, right? If it's built like 64, you can do shines out of order and, no, you can't. There's a reason I laid out my breakdown of Bianco Hills the way I did. You go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7, with the 7th mission in every world being an incredibly easy Shadow Mario chase. You never need to do any of the other shines in any of the other worlds. They are completely optional. That's true in 64 to an extent, I know. In 64 though, you had the freedom to choose whichever stars you wanted, provided you weren't blocked by the metal cap or something. Each any percent playthrough of 64 is allowed to be different, while each any percent playthrough of Sunshine is rarely different. I recognize you can tackle worlds out of order. Rico Harbor is unlocked the moment you have 3 shine sprites, so you can stop Bianco Hills once you get that many, but unlike 64, you are required to go back and finish Bianco Hills no matter what. It's also not like going after extraneous shine sprites helps very much, as playing the game normally will give you more than enough to unlock every world. You need 30 shines in total to unlock Pianta Village, but that's it. You only ever need 30. Compare that to the 70 you needed in 64 to reach Bowser. In 64, you had near limitless freedom to tackle the various worlds and secrets in any order you wanted, as progression was star-based. This is only slightly true in Sunshine, but the impact is reduced significantly by the lowered shine total, as well as railroading you into a sequential mission structure in a game that's dying to let you hunt for shines in a vibrant world. Think about it like this. In 64, you could skip entire worlds if you really wanted to. Don't want to do Wet Dry World? You never have to. Don't want to do Rainbow Ride or TikTok Clock? Don't have to. In Sunshine, no matter what, you are doing 7 shines in 7 worlds, so sit down and shut up. I got a lot of comments on my Super Mario 64 video, some of which were excellent and you should definitely give a read, which disagreed with my take that booting you out of a level was inherently bad. There were a lot of opinions. Some people disagreed with my point about the correlation between length and price point. Some people disagreed that the game was intentionally padded. Some disagreed that it even had a negative effect on the game. This is all fine, of course, but maybe I didn't do a very good job explaining my own stance. Part of the reason I might feel the way I do isn't because I grew up with Banjo-Kazooie or anything. In fact, I still haven't played a Banjo game. Rather, there's a relatively underknown platformer I grew up with before I even touched Mario Sunshine or 64. Toy Story 2: Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue. Yeah, a movie tie-in game of all things is the one to set me off about padding. So how is this game structured? Much like Mario games, you have a central MacGuffin you need to collect to open pathways to new areas. In this case, Pizza Planet tokens. Every level minus the boss levels contain 5 Pizza Planet tokens, for a total of 50 overall tokens, and a minimum of 40 tokens required to reach the final boss. Not including bosses, there are 10 worlds to explore which you select sequentially along a linear track. The first level, Andy's house, is about the same size as something like Bob-omb Battlefield, with about as much to do. You can fight the robot upstairs, collect 50 coins for Ham, collect the 5 missing sheep for Bo Peep, find the secret token in the basement, and race RC in the garage. What you'll notice upon collecting a token is that you don't get booted out and instead are asked to continue or exit the level. This is an efficient, though somewhat unnatural way to keep a quick pace, allowing you to exit the level at any time. This was one of the first collectathons I had ever played, so while I enjoyed 64 and Sunshine more because, to be frank, they have a lot more substance than Toy Story 2, I was always confused as to why Sunshine in particular had so much padding. I can cut a lot of slack for 64, one of the first collectathons ever made. There were bound to be mistakes. It doesn't change the fact that it slows the pace down to a crawl sometimes, but in some ways it was an inevitability. Something was going to go wrong during the transition. Sunshine, on the other hand, came out for the GameCube and has even less of an excuse. It exists in a world with 2 Banjo-Kazooie games, Donkey Kong 64, Toy Story 2, all games that varied in quality but had an acceptable baseline. Look back at Bianco Hills for a minute. What would the stage feel like if the boot-out system didn't exist? First of all, it would mean that every challenge would exist in the world at the same time. Presumably, there'd be goop on the ground, that polluted piranha would be in the same spot, but upon defeating him, you'd raise a path to Petey Piranha at the windmill. Instead of cramming 2 versions of him across 2 different shines, perhaps this boss encounter could be made more memorable by mashing both of these encounters into one. You could start by hitting him while he's asleep first, chasing him to the windmill where you fight him in an enclosed space, or it could work the other way around, starting in an enclosed space with a simple boss pattern, but eventually transitioning outside the windmill where you have to start shooting him out of the sky and avoiding his tornadoes. This would exist at the same time as the 2 8 red coin missions, which could easily be mixed into one shine instead and spread well across the stage like the blue coins. You could drop in and just explore to your heart's content, and watch as the more shines you collect, the more goop you clean, the more the level evolves without the need to keep throwing you to the curb. Maybe it wouldn't be as seamless in evolution, maybe there'd just be direct consequences to the problems you solve. Perhaps cleaning all the goop would trigger a transition via cutscene or other loading zone that would change the level. Obviously this is a rough workaround, and a lot would need to be reworked for it to even be remotely feasible. However, I truly do believe that if the devs had more time than they did, this could have been the result instead. There aren't simply rumors that Sunshine was rushed, it's pretty well known at this point. The game is rife with evidence of it. Riding Yoshi across multiple boats, booting you out of the levels, the 7 shine requirement, and a lot of the blue coins seem to be stand-ins for shine sprites that could have existed in the main game. Everyone has already said this is a major problem, but I think it's much more of a root issue than people realize. Besides the strengths I mentioned near the beginning, almost nothing in Sunshine was developed nearly as much as it could have been. Take Flood, an extremely underdeveloped gimmick by Mario standards. Flood on its own does not contribute to the freedom of control you'd expect as an extension to his moveset. The hover nozzle is more about correcting mistakes than it is about keeping momentum. Whenever you use it, the camera attempts to shift behind Mario and your momentum is halted entirely. I actually don't like that it seems to have completely replaced the long jump. These 2 moves are not mutually exclusive. The turbo nozzle is completely situational, as most of the stages are too maze-like in their geometry to accommodate a nozzle focused on pushing Mario forward. It's a shame too, because in stages like Rico Harbor, where it would be put to good use, you instead surf on gloopers, which are simply inferior. You aren't allowed to stop, and the moment you run into an object, you die. 2 things the turbo nozzle is free from. Why do they let you use the hover nozzle on Delfino Airstrip to get the 8 red coins? Do you think maybe the bloopers are used to artificially extend the game? I don't know, I'm not Confucius. Instead, the turbo nozzle is relegated to secret areas like this one, focused on timing jumps. This is about the only time the turbo nozzle's momentum is put to good use, and of course, it's just crammed into a secret area somewhere. The rocket nozzle does see more use. You can catapult to the top of the beams in Rico Harbor without going through the trouble of completing the platforming challenge on the lower levels first. It's mostly used in later missions of level to reach higher areas that you already platformed up to in previous missions. Yet, the rocket nozzle doesn't add much of anything to the game outside of the fleeting thrill you get when Mario flies into the air. If Mario could keep the nozzles as permanent upgrades, maybe each level could necessitate you use them, thus giving their inclusion more meaning. I'm fine with both the rocket and turbo nozzles unlocking further into the game, as having them both at the start would break a lot of the challenges in the early game. However, I see no reason to not keep them once they're unlocked. I know Matthew Matosis brought up that it would be awkward to switch between 3 nozzles with the X and Y buttons, as there's always the possibility you'll hit the button one too many times and end up on the wrong nozzle. I agree somewhat, though I never seem to have much trouble switching between 3 modes in a game like Sonic Heroes. Here's the thing though, they didn't even need to keep it on 2 buttons. See, game controllers have this peculiar feature, what's it called again? Oh right, the D-pad. Now, I recognize the quality of the GameCube D-pad is subpar, but for the purposes of selecting from 4 different nozzles, it is more than sufficient. The D-pad has no designation to begin with, it's almost too perfect if you think about it. This is significant because every time you change your nozzle, you're forsaking the hover nozzle. I expressed my appreciation for the special stages because they took away FLUDD entirely, but I don't like having to choose any other nozzle other than the hover nozzle for multiple reasons. If I have FLUDD, I'll definitely want that safety net just in case something goes wrong, and in many cases the hover nozzle is required to clear long gaps or pseudo-required to sequence break. To switch nozzles at all, you need to scour each stage for specialized boxes, and that includes switching back to the hover nozzle. Since the hover nozzle is used by far the most often, you'll frequently be switching to either the rocket or turbo nozzles, then switching back to the hover nozzle immediately. I don't feel the game would be too easy with all the nozzles in hand either. There's a built-in handicap in the form of the water meter. Once you run out of water, you can't use FLUDD and need to go find a body of water to recharge. This isn't very difficult, but it is an inconvenience, which might dissuade you from spamming the rocket nozzle in particular. It consumes by far the most water of any nozzle, with several jumps you'll already be close to empty. If you want to spam the thing up somewhere, you'd run the risk of losing the use of the hover nozzle for tighter platforming. Do you see the potential for on-the-fly decision-making? As it currently functions, you never have the luxury of the hover nozzle in the first place, and because there's rarely any exchange between the uses of the hover and rocket nozzles, it's not like you're losing much when you can't use it as a safety net. You never had the option to begin with. In its normal mode, you can enhance your slide dash, and that's fun, but aside from that, you'll just be washing away graffiti and the occasional goop. It's a surprisingly redundant, wasted inclusion to a series known for stellar gimmicks. Like I said before, the game only works provided you enjoy these areas enough to explore them. I can't deny that some of the fun objectives from 64 make their return. I love hunting for 8 red coins, 100 coins, blue coins even. Yes, I actually do like blue coins because they encourage you to comb through each world. Hot take alert, these are really the only objectives that matter to the conceit of the game. Blue coins don't boot you out, you can collect them at your own pace, and they're usually the most fun to collect because of that. If the clunky episode structure didn't exist, it would probably be a perfect system. As it stands, they hide very specific blue coins behind random missions, meaning that getting all of the blue coins at once is a real hindrance. Leaving these levels all the time also exposes some of the more underwhelming missions in a gameplay sense. They range from throwing small chain chomps into some water, pulling a large chain chomp into some water, ground pounding some turtles, washing off some piantas, fighting PD Piranha, fighting PD Piranha 2.0, spraying some water on a manta ray, cleaning some dirty teeth. Okay, seriously? Cleaning teeth with the hover nozzle? Like, I get it, it's cute that cleaning its teeth cleans Noki Bay, but this entire mission is a huge waste of time. Think about this mission, what are you doing? Hovering over some teeth, waiting a while for it to open its mouth again, occasionally getting some air, trying to aim the water correctly, struggling against the underwater hover nozzle physics? You just shoot water and wait around for a while until it's done. This isn't a boss fight, it doesn't fight back outside of a few poison bubbles that burst the instant you hit them in water. I half expected it to start swimming around the room, forcing you to get creative with your positioning or something, but no, that's it. Every boss is like this. PD Piranha is used twice with almost no variation. Mecha Bowser is used twice, except the second time you're just popping some balloons, yay! King Boo is kind of interesting, but once you figure out his pattern, all you're doing is waiting for the spicy peppers to land on his roulette wheel and groaning when it doesn't happen. How about the lead up to King Boo, the one where you have to spray some tiles and roulette wheels with water, praying that a single strand of water doesn't suddenly throw everything off balance. Waiting, spraying. There's a mission where you push a watermelon down a hill and spray every single Cataquack out of the way, slowly inching the watermelon forward, bouncing on a Cataquack. You are doing A watermelon escort mission. None of this is compelling to me inherently. I don't have fun fighting these bosses again because they all take too long and rely on simple cycles. At least the bosses in 64 went down in seconds because of their simplicity. Sunshine has a set of 2 bloopers that show up all the damn time. One where you shoot its mouth, wait, shoot its mouth, wait. Then the other one where you wait for it to attack, pull tentacles, wait for it to attack, pull tentacles, pull face, and then do it again for good measure. 3 times this happens. Their redundancy is just highlighted by how seemingly important they are. Sometimes you do platforming, like when you navigate the support beams or park attractions, but these are pretty rare in comparison to the other weird stuff they have you doing. In Ricco Harbor, there's a mission where you get Yoshi, spray some fish, jump on like 2 platforms, and you're done. I hate anything involving Yoshi. I don't even fully understand why they included him. At his best, you're jumping around simple obstacles. At worst, you're, well, doing the most despised mission in the entire franchise. He isn't an upgrade anymore, he's a roadblock. He serves the same annoying purpose as the special caps in 64, and on that note, so do the nozzles. Except in the case of the nozzles, they aren't a timed, temporary upgrade. These named missions yield shine sprites as a reward and are framed around that specific objective and nothing else. Perhaps if it was a level without a mission structure, without a boot-out system, it would give me satisfaction to push a watermelon down a hill for a reward in the same way I feel satisfaction hunting for blue coins. I can do them in any order I want. I can do them at the beat of my own drum. None of this is able to come together because the game is so insistent on taking you out of the experience as much as humanly possible. To extend runtime, to stay faithful to 64, to keep things fresh? I don't know. I really do think Sunshine would be substantially improved just by taking this stuff out, which is even more than I'm willing to say for 64. This linear, suffocating mission structure runs counter to everything a Collectathon stands for. Here's the question I want to end on. What was Sunshine's responsibility? To be a true 3D Mario game, or to be a true sequel to Mario 64? Either way, I'd argue it failed. It tried to have its cake and eat it too. It tried to be a linear challenge-based platformer while also being an immersive collectathon with almost no time to keep up with that ambitious goal. Maybe I'm a little harsher on this game because it's a sequel and it so obviously made some of 64's problems even worse by comparison, but that's only because its immersive quality is so damn good in the first place. I think that's why people still love this game despite its seemingly glaring faults. The potential here, given what already works, is off the charts. Super Mario Sunshine is perhaps the most divisive Mario game ever. My good friend Exoparadigm Gamer loves it, Andre from GameXplain hates it, and they are both equally valid in their viewpoints. Where do I fall? Well, I can't lie, it's dropped dramatically over the years. I stated that Mario 64 may have been my least favorite of the 3D Mario games, and that still holds true to an extent. However, I do make a tiny distinction between the types of 3D Mario games I'm classifying. After all, it feels a little weird to rank 64 against something like 3D Land or World. So, strictly comparing Sunshine to 64, I prefer what Sunshine was able to add in terms of immersion, control, and level design. It nailed an aspect of collectathons that I'd really like to see return someday. I seriously can't oversell just how great Isle Delfino is and how fun it is for me to run around in it. I'm sure people wonder about my critical process when I write, but it's as simple as I play a game, I note what my gut reaction is, positive, negative, in between, and then I attempt to explain to both myself and my audience why my gut reaction was the way it was. I never deliberately attempt to mislead people or surprise people or go against the grain. I speak directly from the heart, directly from my own personal experience. Going back to play Sunshine made me realize that the mission structure aggravates me more than it ever has. I'm serious about it being a major flaw, yet I still enjoy fully completing it to an extent. Part of the reason it took me so long to make this video is that my opinion of this game felt like an absolute mess. I was constantly second-guessing myself, wondering if maybe I secretly still loved everything about Sunshine, or wanted nothing to do with it after all, and the meme didn't really help. Sunshine is still pretty fun as a Mario game, much like 64, but I'd argue Sunshine has even more missed potential than the latter. That's a real damn shame. This script was pretty damn difficult to write, so I'm glad you've all waited patiently for me to overcome my writer's block and other such issues. If you'd like to support me, the best way you can do that is to support me on Patreon. I am so thankful for all of my current patrons for funding what I hope to one day be my career. If you don't mind, I'd like to give special thanks to a few patrons: Lord Arceus, Dominique Gendron Langla, Lucas Waldeck, Chuck Harkins, Andrew Newberry Davis, Cameron Douglas, B. Shimon, my own father again, Mackenzie Marchbank, Pierce Bordeaux, Duke091, and Christopher Knoll. If you can't monetarily support me, I completely understand. You can always comment down below. I'm interested to see what will most likely be a divide in the consensus down below, and I read most of my comments when the video's new, so expect me to engage in some of that discussion if you really want me to. Just don't be a dick about it, please. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, my name has been King K. I certainly hope you have some well-deserved fun today.